My daughter-in-law told my son, "Don't bring your mother, she ruins the vibe." So they left for vacation. Without me. No goodbye, no apology. They thought I'd sit home and sulk. I didn't. I changed the locks, took the house back, and ignored every call. Now, they're begging to come back. Before we start, please make sure to like this video and hit that subscribe button so you never miss a story like this, and also comment where you're watching from. Thanks. I was pouring orange juice when I heard it. "Grandma doesn't know, right?" my grandson whispered from the hallway, voice low like he knew he wasn't supposed to say it out loud. I froze, juice carton mid-air. My fingers clenched the handle. Tighter. I didn't move. His mother's voice followed, sharp and hushed. "Don't bring it up again. I said she's not coming. End of story." She didn't say my name. She didn't have to. I stayed perfectly still in the kitchen, my heart thudding like it used to when I'd catch my late husband sneaking a smoke in the garage. Except this time, it wasn't something silly or innocent. This time, it burned. Later that night, when the dinner dishes were cleared and my grandson had gone upstairs, I asked my son, Mark, casually, "So, when do you all head out?" He didn't look at me. He grabbed his phone, scrolled something pointless, and said, "Lisa thought maybe this year it'd be nice if it was just, the four of us, a little less stressful." He said it like he was discussing weather. I nodded slowly, even smiled, like I understood. I didn't ask for details. I didn't ask who booked it, who paid, if they'd packed sunscreen. I just sat down in the living room and stared at the family photo on the wall, one from the last beach trip, where I held the camera and no one asked to include me. That night, I didn't cry. Not because it didn't hurt, but because the hurt was too dry, too familiar, like a cut that scabbed wrong. I slept badly. I lay in my room while they packed suitcases, heard Lisa snapping at the kids, telling them to fold clothes faster, heard Mark asking where the passports were. They moved around like I didn't exist, like I was the live-in maid who they forgot to dismiss. The next morning, Lisa gave me a chirpy, "Thanks for watching the house," as they wheeled out the luggage. Mark didn't look back. My grandson waved half-heartedly from the back seat. I waved too. Then I locked the door behind them, turned around, and stood in my empty house. I walked straight to the office drawer, the one my husband always told me to keep locked. Inside was the deed. Paper yellowed, but my name still sharp in black ink. Just my name. I laughed. It was short and quiet and shocked even me. They really thought they could push me out of my own home like I was some dusty heirloom in the attic. I sat down in the same chair where Mark used to do his high school homework. I looked around. Everywhere were their fingerprints, their photos, their cheap throw pillows, Lisa's ugly chalkboard in the kitchen that said, "Love rules this house." But love didn't make them exclude me. Fear didn't. Discomfort didn't. No, convenience did. I was inconvenient. I was the wrinkle in their curated family life. I was the reminder that they didn't build this home themselves, that their perfect little family was propped up by someone they couldn't bother to include. I didn't feel like revenge. I didn't feel rage. I felt done. That night, I changed the locks. I unscrewed the chalkboard and dumped it in the trash. I opened the windows and let the house breathe. Then I took a long bath, put on my oldest robe, and drank a glass of wine in the living room. I stared at the front door like I dared them to try walking through it again. They didn't know it yet, but something had shifted. I wasn't waiting to be wanted anymore. I wasn't going to be polite about being invisible. I was here. I was the owner. And I was done pretending this house belonged to anyone else. The house was quieter than usual that morning, but not in a peaceful way. More like a room just after someone slams the door. I sat on the edge of my bed, listening to the muffled shuffle of suitcases being zipped, wheels bumping down the hallway, the soft thuds of drawers opening and closing. Nobody said my name. Nobody asked if I wanted breakfast. I heard Lisa talking, loudly to the kids, giving instructions about chargers and books and snacks, while Mark moved around like a shadow, his voice barely audible under hers. I stayed upstairs until I heard the front door click open, then the drag of luggage across the concrete porch. When I came down, the living room was already half empty, stripped of the mess they usually left behind. Lisa was tightening the straps on the roof carrier, yelling at Aiden to get in the car, while Mark stood awkwardly on the lawn holding a duffel bag like he wasn't sure where to put it. He looked up and saw me through the screen door, but didn't wave. I opened the door slowly, leaned against the frame, and gave a little smile like everything was fine. "Safe travels," I said. Lisa turned and flashed that fake polite face she always used when she needed something. "Thanks again for staying back and watching everything. We'll send you pics." I nodded, then added, "I'll take good care of the place." She gave a tight laugh, said something to Mark I couldn't hear, and climbed into the passenger seat. Aiden waved lazily from the back window. I stood on the porch and watched them drive off like a guest seeing strangers, leave their own party. As the taillights disappeared, I walked inside and locked the door, deadbolt, latch, chain. I went into the kitchen and took down Lisa's chalkboard from the wall, the one that said, "Family means no one gets left behind." I stared at that phrase for a full 10 seconds before throwing it straight into the garbage bin without a sound. I didn't want a single thing in this house that pretended to care about me when the people who put it up clearly didn't. I moved through the rooms slowly, touching each surface like I was wiping away fingerprints. I passed Mark and Lisa's bedroom, the door half open, bed made sloppily, a bottle of perfume still sitting on the dresser. I closed it gently. I didn't want to see any more of their things today. In the hallway closet, I found the folder I was looking for. Yellowed at the edges, heavy with documents. My name was on the front. I sat down at the kitchen table and opened it slowly, my heart already bracing for what I knew. There it was. The house deed. Sole owner, Eleanor Margaret Brennan. Not Mark. Not Lisa. Just me. I leaned back and stared at that paper like it was a map I hadn't looked at in years. I'd forgotten how much power my own signature held. My husband and I had bought this house with cash after his 3rd promotion at the steel mill. We raised 2 boys in it. I'd cooked every meal here, tended to every Christmas, patched every scraped knee, hosted every birthday. And yet, somewhere, along the line, they started acting like it was theirs, like I was a guest, like they were doing me a favor, letting me live in a place I built from the ground up. I stood up slowly, took the deed, and walked to my room. I slid it into the fireproof box at the back of my closet, the one no one else ever touches. Then, I took my purse, drove to the hardware store and bought new locks, front, back, side, and garage. The guy at the counter asked if I needed help installing them. I told him, "No, I've been fixing things longer than you've been alive." By sunset, every key they had was useless. I tossed the old locks in the trash with Lisa's chalkboard. That night, I sat on the back porch with a cup of tea and watched the last light leave the yard. For the first time in years, the house felt like it was breathing with me, not in spite of me. No shouting, no slammed doors, no footsteps over my head, just me and the quiet. I wasn't planning revenge. I wasn't angry, but I was finally aware of something I'd been blind to for years. They didn't see me as family anymore, so I stopped pretending I was. The next morning, I woke up at 6 out of habit, but the silence was so full it felt like it wrapped around me. No thudding footsteps from upstairs, no Lisa shouting for someone to bring down a charger, no cartoons blaring from the living room. I stood in the hallway for a second, barefoot, realizing I hadn't heard peace like this in years. It wasn't just quiet. It was clean, undisturbed, like the house had finally exhaled. I brewed a pot of coffee, real coffee, not the cheap instant kind Lisa kept buying. I poured it into my ceramic mug, not the travel cups they always used, and sat at the table without rushing. Every sip tasted like ownership. After breakfast, I went through every room with a garbage bag and started undoing the life they'd built around me. The cheap little signs Lisa bought that said, "Good vibes only," and "Home is where the Wi-Fi connects." All of them went into the bag. The mail basket overflowing with credit card offers and coupons they never sorted through, gone. The decorative bowls filled with fake lemons. The throw pillows that didn't match. I threw out the ugly bath mat with the wine stain she never bothered to clean. Then I walked into what used to be the guest room, but had become a storage pile of their unopened Amazon boxes and forgotten junk, and I started dragging everything to the garage. I wasn't even mad. I just felt relieved, like every piece I removed gave the house back a little more of its spine. I opened windows in every room, let the air sweep through, and for the first time in ages, I didn't feel like I was walking on eggshells in my own home. Around noon, I made a sandwich and ate it in the living room, feet up on the coffee table, no coasters, no commentary. I texted Doris and asked if she wanted to come by for wine that evening, and she responded with a laughing emoji and, hell, yes. At 4, I drove to the store and bought a bottle of Cabernet, crackers, and that good aged cheddar I never used to buy because someone would always say it was too strong. Not today. When Doris arrived just after 5, she looked around and said, "You cleaned house, literally." I handed her a glass and said, "I reclaimed it." We sat out back, where the kids usually threw soccer balls at the fence, and I told her everything. The vacation, the whisper I overheard, the lock changes. She didn't interrupt, just sipped, nodded, and stared at me like she was seeing a different version of the person she'd known for decades. Finally, she said, "You finally snapped." I smiled and shook my head. No, I finally stopped swallowing it. After she left, I rinsed the glasses, wiped the counters, and walked slowly through the house. Every room I passed was in order, not because I cleaned it for someone else, but because I chose to. No waiting for permission, no stepping around others' messes. I ended in the living room and sat down again in my husband's old chair, the one Mark used to pretend was a spaceship when he was 6. I ran my hand over the armrest, thinking how far removed that boy was from the man who let me be cut out like a piece of bruised fruit. I wasn't bitter. I was wide awake. That night, I went to sleep with the doors locked, the deed tucked safely, where no one could touch it, and a quiet certainty inside me that I hadn't felt since the day I signed the mortgage. This is my house. Not theirs, not shared, not up for negotiation. Mine. 3 days later, they came back. I knew the second the motion light flicked on outside and the low hum of the car engine rolled up the driveway. I didn't move from my seat in the back room. I had been crocheting, something I hadn't done in years, the rhythm of hook and yarn keeping my hands steady while my heart waited. I heard the car doors open, one by one, followed by voices, confused, tired, irritated. The key jingled in the front door. A few soft clicks, then the rattle of the handle. Again, harder, then silence. I waited. Mark knocked once. Nothing aggressive, just a slow thump like he was still half hoping it was a mistake. "Mom?" He called, almost tentative. I didn't answer. I sat perfectly still. "Mom? It's us," he tried again, louder this time. "Something's wrong with the lock." I let another beat pass before I stood, quiet as breath, and walked to the kitchen window. I peered through the curtain just enough to see Lisa pacing, with her arms crossed, mouthing something sharp to Mark, who was already pulling out his phone. He called. I watched my phone light up from across the room. I didn't touch it. He left a voicemail, then another. Then I heard the kids' voices, Aiden asking if Grandma was mad, the little one crying about needing to pee. Lisa was full. Volume now, snapping at Mark. "She changed the locks? Are you kidding me?" Mark tried the knob one last time, then walked toward the garage. That one had been replaced too. I watched him try the side entrance, his shoulders sinking lower. Each time, 10 minutes passed, then 15, then the engine started again. I watched the taillights fade into the street, same way I had a week ago, only this time they weren't off to paradise. This time they had nowhere to go. I sat back down, heart pounding, not out of fear, but something stronger. Certainty. I was done being invisible. Later that night, around 10:30, my phone buzzed again. A new number. I didn't answer, but the voicemail came in right after. Mark's voice, tight, low, embarrassed. "Hey, we're at the Motel 6 off Route 12, just for the night. I'll call again tomorrow. Maybe we can talk then." I saved the voicemail but didn't respond. The next morning, I took a walk through the house. The sun was hitting the hallway just right, lighting up the floorboards I'd polished by hand last week. Everything was clean. Everything was still. It was mine. Around noon, I went to the pantry and grabbed a hammer. I took the old family portrait. Off the wall, the one with Lisa's fake smile and my face squished at the end like I'd been added in last minute, and pried open the back. I slid the photo out, folded it twice, and threw it in the trash. Then I replaced it with a picture of just me and my boys when they were little, standing in front of this very house. I hung it back up in the same spot. Let them notice the change. Let them remember who gave them this home to begin with. That evening, I poured myself another glass of wine and sat on the porch. I stared out at the yard, at the garden I used to tend before Lisa decided she didn't like messy plants, at the chipped lawn gnome Aiden had painted when he was 6 before she called it tacky and hid it in the shed. I had put it back, front and center. Let them see everything they'd pushed aside. Let them feel the absence of their own entitlement. The porch light flicked on as the sun dropped low, and I stayed there in the cool breeze, the phone silent. Beside me, they were out there, probably squished into a 2-bed motel room with buzzing lights and thin sheets, wondering how I could be so cold. But it wasn't coldness. It was clarity. They had drawn the line first. I just built the wall to match. By the 3rd day of silence, the calls started changing tone. Mark had left 3 voicemails the first night, all of them carefully polite, each more strained than the last. By day 2, Lisa had taken over. Her voice on the voicemail was clipped and sarcastic. Real mature, Eleanor, locking your own family out of their home. Hope that makes you feel powerful. I deleted that one without a second thought. On the 4th day, a letter came, not from them, but from a local attorney's office. A formal request for mediation regarding residential property rights, with Lisa's name typed neatly across the top. I read it once, then again, and let out a breath so sharp it surprised me. They were trying to make it official, claim part of what wasn't theirs. I didn't call anyone. I didn't get upset. I went straight to the locked cabinet in the laundry room, the one behind the old mop and stepladder where my husband used to keep every bill, record, and receipt since the 80s. I pulled out the top drawer, flipped through folders until I found the thick red one labeled Property. I carried it to the kitchen table, sat down, and opened it slowly, like peeling a bandage you already know will sting. The first few pages were familiar. The original deed, updated tax records, maintenance receipts, all in my name. Clean, clear, indisputable. Then, toward the back, wedged in behind a property tax notice from 3 years ago, I saw something I didn't recognize. An email printout from Mark's email account, dated just 6 months ago. It was a forwarded message thread between him, Lisa, and a realtor named Nancy. The subject line was chilling. Potential sale, spring timeline. I read every line. Lisa had asked if the house could list above market value since it had been in the family for decades. Mark replied that once things are fully in our name, they'd like to move out of state and upgrade. The realtor confirmed she'd do a full market assessment in April. I stared at the date. April. Just a few months from now. They weren't just ignoring me. They were planning to erase me. Not by accident. Not in a moment of heat. But through paperwork behind my back, while they still smiled across the dinner table and let me fold their laundry. That was the moment I stopped second-guessing anything I'd done. I went to my room, pulled the original deed again, and laid it beside the email. I took photos of everything and uploaded them to my cloud storage just in case. Then I picked up the phone, called the attorney listed in their letter, and calmly told the receptionist, "This is Eleanor Brennan. I'd like to submit documented proof of full ownership before any mediation occurs." I emailed the files while still on the line. I didn't shout. I didn't panic. I just made it undeniable. That evening, the calls from Mark picked back up. "Mom, I think there's been a misunderstanding," he said in one message. "Lisa didn't mean to file anything without checking in with you. Can we just talk?" I didn't respond. At sunset, I walked to the kitchen, opened the drawer where Lisa kept her collection of real estate flyers, and threw the whole stack into the trash. I grabbed a match, lit one flyer at the edge, and dropped it into the fire pit outside. I watched it curl and blacken. Then I added the email printout. I didn't need it anymore. I had made my point. Let them try to sell a house they don't own. Let them explain to the kids why they're sleeping in a motel and not the rooms I painted by hand. Let them sit with the truth for once. They weren't pushed out. They were never entitled to stay. It was the middle of the 4th night when I found it, tucked between the couch cushions, wedged so deep I wouldn't have noticed if I hadn't dropped the remote. A pale blue phone case with a cracked corner and a faded sticker of a cartoon fox. Aiden's phone. My grandson must have left it here in the rush, and somehow none of them realized. I held it in my hand for a moment, thinking of how many times Lisa had shouted at him to put it down, how often he'd sat on that very couch playing games while I folded towels on the ottoman. I thought about turning it off and leaving it on the porch for them to pick up, but then it lit up. A notification flashed across the screen. One new voice memo. My finger hovered for a second, then tapped it open. The file had been recorded. The morning they left. The title said, "For Grandma." I sat down and pressed play. His voice came through shaky, like he was holding the phone too close, whispering so no one would hear. "Hi, Grandma. I don't know if you'll ever hear this, but I wanted you to come. I asked if you could. Mom said no, and Dad didn't say anything. I don't know why. I miss you when you're not there." My throat tightened instantly, the kind of ache that starts at the base of your chest and crawls up your neck. He paused in the recording, breathing hard like he was trying not to cry. "I don't think it's fair. You always make me pancakes when Mom forgets. You always come to my games. I don't get why you had to stay." Then there was just silence. 10 seconds. 15. I thought it ended, but then he added, barely above a whisper, "I wish you were coming with us." The recording clicked off. I sat there holding that phone like it weighed 100 pounds. That small, awkward voice from a child who understood more than the adults gave him credit for had just shattered the last piece of restraint I'd been clinging to. Lisa hadn't just excluded me. She had lied about it to everyone else, including her own son. She spun it like I didn't want to come, like it was easier without Grandma, like she was protecting their peace, when really she was just deleting me from their narrative. And Mark let her. Worse, he helped her write it. I put the phone on the coffee table and stared at it for a long time. I thought about calling Aiden, telling him thank you, but I knew Lisa probably had a tracker or lock on the account. I wasn't about to give her another excuse to twist this into something it wasn't. Instead, I grabbed a pen and wrote him a letter. Just a few lines. "I heard your message. I love you. You didn't do anything wrong. I'll always be here. When you need me. Love, Grandma." I folded it, slid it into an envelope, and taped it to the back of the phone case. The next morning, I placed the phone in a padded envelope and mailed it to the motel address Mark had left on the first voicemail. No return name, just my handwriting. Neat and careful. That night, I sat by the fire pit again, the cold air sharp against my skin, and watched the flames crackle under the black sky. I reached into the tin where I'd stored the last printed copy of that email thread, the one I hadn't burned yet, and finally dropped it into the fire. It curled up fast. The ink running before the paper even turned to ash. It wasn't for proof anymore. I had already proved enough. This was about letting go of what they had planned and focusing on what I still had. A voice, a name on the deed, and a grandson who still remembered who I was, even if his parents tried to rewrite the story. Let them stew in the motel another night. Let them explain to their kids why Grandma won't open the door. I wasn't hiding. I was home. It was nearly 2 a.m. when the knock came. Not loud or urgent, just slow and deliberate. 3 short thumps, like someone trying not to wake the whole street. I sat up in bed instantly, my heart thudding, instincts on full alert. I didn't turn on the lights. I walked barefoot to the window, pulling the curtain back just enough to see who it was. Mark. Alone. Standing there in an old hoodie, hair a mess, shoulders hunched forward like a scolded teenager. No Lisa. No kids. Just him and whatever guilt he'd finally decided to carry with him. I stood there for a good 30 seconds, letting the silence stretch long enough to be uncomfortable. Then I unlocked the deadbolt and opened the door just a crack. He didn't speak right away. He looked smaller somehow, like something in him had deflated. "I didn't know where else to go," he said finally, voice hoarse. "Lisa left. She took the kids and went to her sister's. Said she's done. Blamed me for everything." He rubbed his face, and I could see the dark circles under his eyes even in the porch light. "I'm not asking to stay. I needed to see you." I didn't move, didn't open the door wider. I stared at him like I was trying to see past the man he became and find even a glimpse of the boy who used to leave flowers on my pillow after a spelling test. You let her do this to me, I said quietly, flat. He nodded without argument. I did. The way he said it, no defense, no excuse, broke something I didn't know was still intact inside me. I opened the door just enough to let the cold air in. The house is not open, I said. But the shed has a working light and a space heater. There's blankets in the chest. It locks from the inside. He looked like he wanted to say thank you, but thought better of it. He just nodded, stepped back into the night, and made his way toward the backyard. I watched from the window as he opened the shed door, paused a moment like he was bracing for humiliation, then stepped inside. I stood there in the dark for a long time, arms crossed, jaw clenched so tight it hurt. This wasn't victory. This wasn't revenge. This was a grown man who let his wife push his mother out of her own home and was now facing the full weight of what he let happen. I knew Lisa wouldn't be back. That kind of woman doesn't stick around when things get uncomfortable. She liked control. The minute she lost it, she ran. But I also knew Mark would have to live with the silence she left behind. Around 5:30 in the morning, I made a fresh pot of coffee and poured 2 cups. One for me, one for him. I opened the back door and walked to the shed, knocking twice before I stepped in. He was sitting on the folded cot, wrapped in an old quilt from the guest room, eyes red and tired. I handed him the cup without speaking, and he took it with both hands like it might slip if he wasn't careful. We sat there for a few minutes, not saying a word, just letting the warmth fill the space between us. Finally, he spoke. I should have stopped it. A long time ago. I just kept telling myself you were fine with everything. That you didn't. Mind. I looked straight at him. That's what made it worse. He swallowed hard. I didn't protect you, and you always protected me. I didn't offer comfort. I didn't say it was okay. I let the truth sit there between us, thick and raw and deserved. You don't get the house, I said. You don't get a room, but you get this moment, one night, to understand what you threw away. He nodded slowly, eyes on the floor. I'll sleep in my car tomorrow. I stood up, finished my coffee, and walked out. I didn't look back. I didn't have to. That was the first night in years my son saw me clearly. Not as a background figure, not as the default caretaker, but as the woman who gave him everything and finally took it back. The next morning, I didn't check to see if he was still in there. I didn't hover or peek out the window like some soft-hearted mother trying to smooth things over. I poured my coffee, made toast, and sat at the kitchen table like it was any other day. Around 9, I heard the shed door creak open. Mark stepped onto the porch slowly, like someone who wasn't sure they were still allowed to be seen. He didn't knock. He just stood there for a second, hands in his pockets. Then finally, walked away. I watched him from the side window, his figure shrinking down the driveway with no suitcase, no fanfare, nothing. He looked like a man who'd finally run out of versions of the story where he's the victim. I thought that was the end of it. I assumed he'd go crawl back to Lisa, beg her to come home, try to rewrite the past with a few soft apologies. But that afternoon, I heard his car pull up again. He didn't get out right away. I walked to the porch and leaned on the railing, waiting. When he finally stepped out, he wasn't carrying bags or making excuses. He was holding an old photo album, one I hadn't seen in years. I found it in the garage, under the holiday. Bins, he said, voice quiet but steady. I didn't say anything. He opened it to a picture of the 3 of us at the beach, back when he was maybe 9 and Sam was 12. My late husband was holding the camera. In the photo, Mark's face was sunburnt and squinting, and I was behind him, arms on both boys' shoulders, all of us grinning like we didn't know how fast it would all unravel. You used to sit with us after dinner and make us name 5 things we were grateful for, he said. I used to hate it, but now I get it. He looked up at me, eyes clearer than I'd seen in years. I didn't just let Lisa push you out. I needed her to, because you reminded me who I used to be, and I couldn't face how far I'd let that go. I crossed my arms. And now? He let out a slow breath. Now I'm not sure who I am anymore, but I don't want to keep pretending you were the problem. You weren't. You were just inconvenient to the version of my life I thought I was supposed to build. I stared at him, trying to see if this was another performance, another guilt-drenched half-apology looking for a quick fix. but something in his face had shifted. Less defense, more quiet wreckage. "I'm staying at a friend's for a few weeks," he added. "Lisa's not coming back. She said I had to choose between being her husband or being your son. And I finally realized I never stopped being your son. I just started acting like someone else's." I didn't cry. I didn't reach out or rush to hug him. I just said, "I'm not interested in starting over. I'm interested in starting honest." He nodded. "That's fair." I took the photo album from his hands and flipped through. A few pages, tracing the faces of people I'd once fought so hard to keep under one roof. "You can visit, but you won't stay. This house isn't your fallback." He didn't argue. "I know. I don't want the house anymore. I just want you to know I remember what it felt like when we were good. And I want to get back there if you'll let me." I closed the album, walked past him into the house, and left the door open. Not wide, just enough. That night, I made dinner for one, but I pulled out 2 forks, not because I expected company, but because I'd spent enough nights setting the table for people who didn't see me. This time, I'd decide who sat across from me, and why. 2 weeks passed before I heard from Mark again. He didn't call or text. He just showed up late one afternoon in a different car, a used sedan that looked like it had seen better days. When he stepped out, he was wearing a button-up shirt, hair combed, and holding a thin envelope. I met him on the porch, not with suspicion, but with the kind of stillness that comes from finally having nothing left to lose. "It's done," he said, handing me the envelope. I opened it and saw the words I never expected to read in real life: "Final judgment of dissolution of marriage." Lisa had signed. He had signed. It was real. "She's staying with her sister. In Oregon," he said. "Wants a clean break. Says the kids can visit once things are stable." I didn't know what to say to that. Not because I wanted her back in his life, but because it was surreal to watch the entire life he built with her come undone like that. "I'm not asking for pity," he added quickly, reading my face. "Just wanted you to know it's official. And not because she made me choose. Because I saw what choosing her cost me." I nodded, but the emotion in my chest didn't soften. It sat heavy and unsure. "Where are you living now?" I asked. "Friend's garage apartment," he said. "It's small but clean. Got a kitchenette, decent shower. I even cook sometimes. I burned rice last night." For the first time in a long time, I smiled. Not because of the rice, but because he sounded like someone who was rebuilding from scratch, not just patching holes in a collapsing wall. "I found a place for the kids, too," he added. "Half the week. Courts gave me temporary custody till we finalize. Aiden asked if he could come see you. I told him I'd ask. I felt something stir then. Quiet, careful hope. But I didn't reach for it yet. You can bring him by, I said. But no sleepovers. And you're here with him the whole time." "Of course," he said, like he didn't expect anything else. "And just so you know, I'm not planning to move back in. I get it now. This house was never mine to reclaim, but I've been saving. I'm hoping to get a place by winter. Thought maybe you'd help me pick out curtains." That caught me. Off guard. Curtains. Something so small, so domestic, but it landed hard. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I stepped back into the house and came out with a box I'd been meaning to throw out, full of old kitchen tools and duplicates I never used. "Take these," I said. "You'll need them." He opened the box, saw the can opener, the extra spatula, a chipped mug with a bird on it. He picked up the mug and stared at it for a second. "This was Dad's favorite," he said. I didn't say anything. I just watched him tuck it carefully back into the box like it was something fragile. As he left, I didn't feel proud or vindicated. I felt tired, like something deep in my chest had finally stopped bracing for impact. That night, I stood in the guest room, the one Lisa had turned into a dressing room with her clothes and mirrors and shelves of shoes, and looked at the empty walls. I decided to paint it. Soft yellow. Something warm. Not for anyone else. Just for me. I wasn't rebuilding my family. I was recentering my life. One wall at a time. It was Christmas Eve when I finally opened the front door to the sound of laughter. That didn't sting. Mark pulled up in his car with Aiden and the little one, their arms full of mismatched wrapping paper, grocery bags, and a lopsided cake box. I stood at the door in my new yellow sweater, the one I'd picked out last week just for this, and let them in without ceremony. No speeches, no big reunions, just quiet footsteps on floors that no longer needed tiptoeing. Aiden dropped his bag and hugged me like he hadn't seen me in years, and for him, maybe it felt that way. "Grandma, you made cookies, right?" he asked before even taking off his coat. I nodded and pointed toward the kitchen, where the smell of cinnamon still hung in the air. Mark followed behind, more reserved but more present than I'd seen in a long time. "We didn't want to overdo it," he said. "Just a small dinner. Thought it'd be good to start something new." I didn't reply. I just walked to the living room, turned on the lights, and revealed the small table I'd set. 4 plates, simple food, nothing extravagant. I'd always done too much before. This time, I did only what felt right. As we ate, Mark told me about the boy's new school schedule, the books he was reading, how he'd started volunteering twice a week at a senior center. He didn't say it out loud, but I knew it was his way of making amends, not with grand gestures, but through the quiet act of showing up. Aiden handed me a homemade card that said, "Best Grandma Ever," in thick crayon. I placed it next to the candle centerpiece I'd made from leftover pine cones and ribbon. After dinner, while the boys played a board game in the corner, Mark helped me wash dishes. We didn't talk much, just moved side by side like we used to before everything got complicated. At one point, he looked up and said, "I finally bought curtains. Gray with blue trim. I remembered you said neutrals are boring." I smirked. "They are." Then he added, "The mug's on the top shelf. I use it every morning." I paused at the sink, hands wet, heart fuller than I'd admit. I nodded once and handed him another plate. Before they left, Aiden asked if he could come back next week. "I want to help paint the garden gnome. The colors are all faded." I smiled. "Bring your own brush." As they walked out, I noticed Mark pause at the door, his eyes catching the new sign I'd hung above the kitchen entry. It was made of reclaimed wood, painted soft cream, and it read, "This house remembers." He didn't comment, just stared for a second too long before giving me a quiet goodnight. I locked the door behind them, turned off the lights, and stood alone in the living room. The silence didn't feel heavy anymore. It felt earned, not the absence of people, but the presence of peace. I walked through the house slowly, running my fingers along the walls, the furniture, every corner that now felt like mine again. Not because I took it by force, but because I finally stopped giving it away. I made a cup of tea, sat in my husband's old chair, and watched the tree lights blink in rhythm. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was waiting for someone to notice me. I didn't need to be the fixer, the peacemaker, or the person who lets everything slide. I was the woman who owned this house, the one who stayed silent when it counted and spoke up when it mattered. And I was no longer invisible. I was home, under my roof, by my rules, always.